name is Josh. I'm going to be your OT today, occupational therapist. Have you worked with OT before?
No.
Okay. Well, real quick, my job is basically to just get you to do your everyday tasks, activities, and needs. And so today we're going to be focusing a little bit on your vision, a little bit on your skills with, some small movements of your hands, and then also your ability to work with seeing something and then being able to copy it or imitate it using a utensil. So, for video purposes, I have the consent form of Emily, who is my patient today, to be video recorded. Okay. So, we're going to start off with a vision screening. Have you ever had your vision screened before?
I go to the eye doctor.
Okay. So yeah, you've definitely done something like this before. So I'm going to move my chair over to here, just for ergonomic sake. Okay. So, first, I'm going to ask you to, so I'm just going to basically ask you to do certain things with your eyes. Try to be relaxed as possible. If anything hurts, or if you have headaches, get dizzy, whatever, just let me know. Okay? What I'm going to first ask you to do is just focus on this pen. Good. Okay. Now I'm going to move this object in multiple different ways. I just would like you to follow it with your eyes. Do not move your head, please. Okay. Okay. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this object closer and away from you. Again, try to keep your eyes on it. Try not to move your head. Good. Okay. And last one, I'm going to use two different utensils here for you to focus on. I'm going to ask you to fixate your vision back and forth between the objects, and I just want to see if you're able to do that. Okay, I'm going to do it in two separate planes. Okay, ready? You may begin. So I am whichever one you like. You're going to bounce back and forth.
Oh, gotcha.
As quick as you can.
Oh, okay.
Good. I'm going to go up here now. Good. And last one. And good. Relax. How are we feeling?
Good.
Yeah.
My bones are jumbled.
Okay. As long as we're not in pain, that's what I'm looking for. Good. Okay. So, first thing we're going to do, or the next thing we're going to do is going to do the bot. So this is going to be an assessment to work on those things that I was saying about, those smaller movements with your hands. So it may be something that we're going to be drawing or cutting or folding. And I'm just going to have you to just make sure that you follow my directions clearly. I'm not going to be able to repeat or say extraneous details. So just try and do your best with what I'm going to say to you, okay? Okay. Throughout this entire assessment as well, you're going to be using a red pencil. Okay? So I'll give you some room. You can take that. Okay. So, here's our first activity. So, what I'm going to have you do is color in this circle. Try to stay inside the lines the best you can. Ready?
Yes.
You may begin.
Is there a time limit?
There is not. Excellent. Okay. Now you are coloring the star. Again, try and stay within the lines as best as possible. Ready?
Yes.
Begin. on to our next activity. So, what I'll have you do is I would need you to draw a line from the car to the house, trying to stay in the lines as best as possible, and make sure you take your time. Ready?
Yes.
You may begin.
Okay.
Alright. Now, we will draw a line on this path from the house to the car, from the car to the house. Try again to stay in the lines as best as possible and take your time. Ready?
Yeah.
Begin.
Okay.
Great. Alright, on to the next activity. This one's called connecting the dots.
Yeah.
This activity, take your time and draw straight lines to connect the dots.
Mhm.
Keep the pencil on the paper until you have connected all of the dots. Ready?
Does it matter which order I connect the dots?
My instructions are only that you must keep the pencil on the paper at all times and connecting the dots using straight lines. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Begin. Excellent. Okay. Now we're going to move on to this next activity I cut out from the booklet so that you are able to fold. So what we're going to have you do is we're going to fold the lines with the line facing out, as I am doing here. Okay, makes sense? Perfect. Okay, now try to do it as well. Fold this corner on the paper on this line. Now fold the other two corners the same way. Now fold this the same way. Right now fold it on this line. Okay, now on to the next activity. So you're going to be using the scissors here. For the video purposes, we have adult scissors. For the normal assessment, we would clearly be using kid scissors, but because Emily's not a kid, those would not be as effective. So, you will cut out the circle, take your time, and try to cut on the line as best as possible. Ready? Excellent. You take that circle. No. Not supposed to do that.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I didn't like it.
No problem. Okay. Okay. This one is making dots and circles. We have 5 practice circles here. So you will try and place dots in each of the circles. You may now practice on these 5 circles. Okay, now we are going to try it again, making a dot in each of the circles. You can go as fast as possible until I tell you to stop. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Begin. Stop. Fantastic. Okay. I can take the red pencil. That concludes our work with the bot 2. And now we will be moving to what is called the VMI, or the VMI. It's going to be done in this booklet. Okay. For this next assessment, you're going to be asked to use this pen. It has black ink and is a ballpoint pen. And you will get 1 try to copy the shape into the blank space without erasing. So you have 1 try. Keep the booklet straight in front of you and do not tilt it. Try your best to do both the easy and the hard ones, and do not skip any. When asked, please turn the page from the top to begin. Okay? So in order to keep it straight as possible. Ready?
I'm flipping this page down.
Yeah, you're always looking from the top. Right? B.
I'll do it here.
Page. That is it. So thank you very much for participating today. I appreciate your time. I will be scoring these, and then we'll be able to let you know how you did and how those are interpreted in the near future. Do you have any questions?
That's fun. Thanks.
All right. Thank you to those that are watching. This is going to be the reflection piece of this assignment. I'm going to be talking a little bit about my client's performance, my client being Emily, her performance on the vision screening, the VMI, and the BOT 2, and then also going to be discussing briefly about my performance, what could have been changed, what I did well. So let's get into it. So Emily was a 23-year-old girl. She is not at age level for any of these assessments besides the vision screening. I did discuss with her before conducting this assignment that, she could make mistakes as a child, as if she was a child, not as an adult, but she decided not to do so. So we'll be getting into that in a little bit. But regardless, it was still good to conduct the assessments with her and kind of learn a little bit about how it's done. So as far as results go, for her vision screening, everything was intact. Her binocular coordination was intact. Being able to use both eyes efficiently to fixate on an object. Same thing with tracking that object in horizontal, diagonal, or vertical planes. Her movements were smooth. It wasn't moving her head. It wasn't in any pain. So those were all good signs. Her eyes were also able to cross midline easily. It wasn't like the object would come across and she would lose focus and then have to fixate again as it came across. And then she was able to converge and diverge her eyes efficiently when the object was brought to her nose or away from her. She does seem to grimace a little bit and, make it seem like she has a little bit of pain or discomfort when it got really close to her nose, but maybe that was just because it was difficult. But for the most part, her vision was intact for all of the areas that we were testing, as well as the saccadic eye movement bouncing back and forth between the two writing utensils. And I'll get into a little bit of how I could have been better with that in just a second. So as far as administering the VMI, Emily scored a perfect score of 15 for the items 7 through 21. She was able to move through the packet fairly quickly, didn't really ask many other questions or didn't seem confused at all. So her raw score, as I said, was a 15. In a normal circumstance, when we were working with a legit patient, you would have to conduct those scores into the standard scores as well as the scaled and percentile rankings. These scores would allow us to compare against other standard scores so that we can, determine whether Emily's visual motor skills were either below typical development, at typical development, or maybe even above typical development. Clearly for this case, since she is 23, her skills are going to be pretty right on tact. Obviously, she didn't make any mistakes. She was scored accurately on all of them, therefore reflecting that her visual motor skills are intact, and I wouldn't be able to tell any developmental delays with those skills with this assessment, with the Berry VMI, since it is for 2 to 7 year olds. So there's that. I'll get into a little bit of my performance with that also in a second. Now moving on to the Bot 2. Emily scored a perfect score of 41 on the fine motor precision subtest, meaning that she did not record any errors on any of those 7 tasks. For the making dots in circles, she scored an 8 out of a 9. She was able to dot 42 circles in 15 seconds. So for the administration of this session, we only calculated the total points, got that raw score. And as I mentioned with the VMI, to get more accurate information and being able to interpret the information, we would want to be able to turn those raw scores into the standard and scale scores. And, also get those confidence intervals, the percentile ranks, and then eventually the age equivalent scores. So as I said, Emily scored a perfect score on the fine motor precision. For the manual dexterity, we only tested one subtest, but she did get an 8 out of possible 9 points. So even without collecting those other more important standardized scores so that we were able to compare her scores as far as age equivalency, we can assume that her skills are intact since she did score perfectly. Didn't ask too many questions, didn't really do anything wrong. There was more so just some things on my part that I'll get into in a second, as I've been saying. But we can assume that her fine motor precision and her manual dexterity for the subtest that we tested for, they are intact, they are at age level. And yeah, so that was her performance on, the bot, the VMI, and then also the vision screening. Sorry, I'm just logging into my computer, fell asleep. And so let's go into my performance. So overall, I thought I did fairly well administering the assessments. I definitely caught myself even in the middle of the administering and definitely after, straying a little bit away from the standardized instructions and also maybe being a little bit unclear. So I'll go into some specifics. So like I said, overall, I felt like I did a good job explaining the assessments and activities in layman's terms. Even when I did use more higher level, if you will, terminology, I was still able to explain it in a way that, the client could understand. Emily is a nurse, so she's pretty familiar with most of the terms I was using, but regardless, one thing I could have done with the vision screening that I noticed was the saccadic eye movement. Didn't really explain that well, and that was one that didn't have standardized instructions, so I could have given more detail for that. She definitely had confusion, and I held up 2 objects. She only looked at one. She didn't realize she had to bounce back and forth. So A little bit of confusion there that was cleared up pretty quickly, but just something that I should keep in mind going forward. As far as the bot, with the tracing and the first or the second, so the curved line, the curved path, I should say, I started tracing from top to bottom, assuming that it was going to be the same as the first one, and I completely forgot that it switched for that. So I just started tracing in the wrong direction. I did fix it, and Emily didn't have any confusion or concerns when I did that. But, you know, if I was doing this for a child and they saw me do that first, they might have made the mistake, and that would have been on me. So a little bit of an error with the standardized instructions and how I should be using my hands to direct them. One thing I did feel like I did well was during the connecting the dots activity. Emily did ask a question as far as, you know, which order do I have to connect the dots. I thought I did a good job by just repeating the instructions that I had been given to say. So she was only able to, you know, go off those instructions, and she was able to do it correctly. But I thought I did a good job staying on task and staying with the standardized instructions there. For the folding the paper activity, again, I strayed away from the standardized instructions a bit. I used a couple different terms that didn't align with what the Bot 2's booklet had, and it was kind of like my flaw a few times. I just, you know, I still have this reflex to add a little bit of context to directions just to make it easier, and I wasn't even with the kid, so that's something that I need to work on and be a little bit more conscious of when administering assessments, obviously specifically with standardized assessments. So I did it again with the folding the paper, just got a little bit away from the instructions there. And then one thing that I noticed that I wasn't really sure how to handle was when Emily was cutting out the circle. Obviously, I had given the instructions as said. I traced my finger around where she should cut, and then when she finished cutting, she went to go make an edit on her circle, and I obviously told her that you couldn't do that, but I caught her too late, and it didn't affect her scoring at all. She still got a perfect score, but I wasn't really sure how that would be handled if it did affect the score. If I had found that, you know, she did cut off a piece of the circle that would have, you know, changed maybe from a 2-point error to, you know, a 1-point error, or, you know, something like that. So that was a little bit confusing. Would love some clarity on that, but overall, I felt like I did a fairly good job. It went really quickly, obviously, because Emily is 23, but, you know, I thought it went well. I thought my performance was fairly okay. We got scores, so did not run into too much trouble as far as getting the accurate scoring, but I believe it still would have been a little tough on some of the subtest tasks because I didn't have the transparency tools or the ruler. But regardless, we were able to get those raw scores, compare them a little bit to where we think Emily would be and we think she's typically developing. And I did go over some mistakes that I made, but also some things I did well, and also a question that I do have for the future. So yeah, so this is my reflection piece about administering the assessments, and I appreciate you listening. Thank you.